words of my lips and all of our lips be those you once spoken. May the prayers of my heart and all of our hearts be those you want heard. And may we live singing, singing even when we don't know how, singing even when we don't know why. Amen. Many of you know that over this past summer, I had the truly remarkable gift of getting to visit Israel and Palestine with a group of Christian clergy from our greater Boston area. And in addition to this trip being this amazing pilgrimage of sorts, of visiting these places that Jesus, Mary, Elizabeth walked and lived their life, there was also the invitation to visit a place that is so live with controversy, with violence, and with pain. And we were constantly kind of going back and forth between that idea of real conflict, holy site, and trying to somehow hold all of that in one trip. As we tried to hold all of those things, our tour guide kept saying to us, while you're here in this region, try to take each visit, each person that you meet, each place that you go, as one tile on a mosaic. Hold that tile, believe what it is that you hear from that tile, and little by little, we're going to try to put the pieces together and not let one tile overwhelm the entire painting, but look at it one by one, even if they seem to contradict. So that theme of mosaics was one that just followed me throughout that entire trip and has proven to be quite a helpful one when I try to hold what can seem contradictory together in one place. And so this theme of mosaics in my mind, it was one that I found particularly was brought to life in a whole new way as our van made its way through a region called the Galilee, and we came into a town called Nazareth. Now, Nazareth is a name that I think many of us here are familiar with, particularly this time of year, for we learn in the Gospel of Luke that this was the hometown of Mary and Joseph, and later of Jesus. And it was here, we hear, that the Annunciation took place. It was here that the angel Gabriel announced to Mary that she was to bear God's child sent to earth. And it was from here that Mary departs with haste to go visit her cousin Elizabeth in today's reading. And so it was with those narratives that were swirling around in our minds on that trip as our bus made its way into the bustling and diverse city called Nazareth. And we went towards the Basilica of the Annunciation, the place where it is said that the angel Gabriel came to Mary. Of all the holy sites that we got to visit in this region, this one was absolutely one of my favorites, for we stepped into the area called the Basilica, and what we immediately came upon was a courtyard with mosaics surrounding us. These mosaics were 43 strikingly different depictions of this one woman, Mary. Each of the 43 mosaics was donated by a different Catholic community in different nations around the world. And I have to say, it was nothing short of breathtaking to see how each country portrayed this one figure with such a vastly different gaze and interpretation. In many of the mosaics that I saw there in the Basilica, Mary was the way that I have often imagined her. I think many of us perhaps have imagined her, where she looks very gentle, very humble, perhaps a little bit overwhelmed at times. In many of those mosaics, her face is turned downwards, and it portrays to me this feeling of modesty and meekness. Those were some of the mosaics that we saw. In others, Mary appears downright regal. She has this extravagance to her. She's surrounded in jewels and gold, almost strutting herself with this mighty power. In others, she is stoic, Mary is staring straight ahead, right at you with a penetrating gaze. She's stoic, she's gentle, she's regal, she's humble, she's overwhelmed, she's powerful, each mosaic seemingly contradicting the one before it, each mosaic filled with its own truth on who this woman was and who this woman is. Amongst all of these images that we saw in front of us, there was one that felt altogether different, and this was the one from South Africa. The South African Mary, she was neither stoic nor gentle, regal nor humble, or at least not from what I could tell. The South African Mary was simply and powerfully exuberant. Her arms were thrown up with abandon, and her head was tilted back towards the sky. She had these swirling colors all around her that seemed to just add to this party. This Mary embodied utter joy. And this was the Mary that I found myself seeing coming to life as I read this week's story from the Gospel of Luke. Today we heard this narrative of Mary leaving Nazareth with haste to visit her cousin Elizabeth. She goes to a Judean town in the hill country, we hear. And as we think about this story together, I want to make sure you see this image on your bulletin cover that artist Lauren Wright Pittman has painted that depicts her view of what is happening in this story. Mary has just learned via angel, not via sonogram, that she is pregnant with this mysterious child. And she finds in her older and also pregnant cousin Elizabeth an incredibly compassionate and encouraging soul sister who blesses her with such love and such prayer that the encounter seems to leave both of them bolstered as new life leaps within them. Having felt and heard the blessing and encouragement of Elizabeth, Mary then bursts into her song, now known as the Magnificat, where she joyfully proclaims God's great blessing upon her life and a bold vision for a just world where the mighty are cast down, the lowly are lifted up, and the hungry are filled with good things. Indeed, as Mary sings this prophetic song of joy, I can't help but see that Mary of South Africa, that Mary who shouts with joy before this new being was even born. She must know that so much could still go wrong. So much does go wrong, in fact. And yet this is the Mary who feels joy in the face of so much uncertainty. Or, as preacher and writer Barbara Brown Taylor puts it so well, she is the Mary who sings ahead of her time. All she has is her unreasonable willingness to believe that the God who has chosen her will be part of whatever it is that happens next. And that, apparently, is enough to make her burst into song. She does not wait to see how things will turn out first. She sings ahead of her time. This is that South African Mary, arms up, heads back, a body filled with joy even amongst such uncertainty. So I've been wondering, what can we learn about life? What can we learn about God's vision for us through Mary's unexpected and maybe even unreasonable joy? This is the question that I've been sitting with this week because, frankly, I find joy amidst uncertainty to be nearly impossible. There have been so many times in my own life, and I would imagine in yours as well, when I think something might be good, I might be feeling a little excited, and yet I absolutely cannot allow myself to feel joy if I don't know how it will all turn out. I don't want to get my hopes up, I often say. This might be happening in our lives when there's the beginning of a new relationship and it seems like maybe there's some potential there. Or maybe there's the first signs of healing after an illness that we didn't know what would happen. Or in the case of Mary, the possibility of new life that still feels so uncertain and so vulnerable. In these cases, I can't help but say it again and again. I don't want to get my hopes up. I can't yet throw my hands up and head back in joyful ecstasy, not yet. And frankly, as I am one of the world's more cautious human beings, I will admit this, I think that's okay. I think that is human, that we can't immediately embody that joy of Mary. And yet, here is this vision in our Holy Scriptures that is beckoning us there. Maybe inviting us, just try it out sometime. And I wonder, why is this there? Does this unreasonable joy have something to teach us? I've come to think that the boldness to celebrate something that hasn't even happened yet, the trust to feel deep gladness even in the face of uncertainty, now that is faith. There is so much that could go wrong. There is so much that does go wrong. And yet when we tap into that deep well of joy, knowing that God's unfolding is happening in ways that we may not fully see or understand, that is faith. Author and theologian Henry Nouwen puts it in this way: while happiness usually depends on circumstances, joy runs deeper. Joy, he writes, is the experience of knowing that you are unconditionally loved and that nothing, sickness, failure, emotional distress, oppression, war, even death, can take that love away. Thus, joy and sorrow can not only coexist, joy can be found in the midst of sorrow. By all outward appearances, Mary's situation was difficult and vulnerable, but her sparkling song of joy flows from a wellspring deeper than the surface of things. Such joy, it may not be immediately attainable for us mere mortals of 2018. But it sure might be something for at least us to practice. As many of you may remember, there is something that we hear at Church of the Covenant every December. And what I am thinking of is that every December, a faithful member of our Nicaragua companions reminds us that we are in the time of Purísima, one of the most holy observances in Nicaragua. This is probably one of the most important festivals of the year. And each December when we hear this, we think of our church's sister community in Dulce Nombre de Jesus. And we send our prayers and we send our blessings upon their annual Purísima celebrations. Now, I have to admit that I consider myself to be a die-hard Nicaragua companion, and yet I've never really known what Purísima is all about. I knew vaguely that it was a recognition of Mary, and with a name like Purísima, which would mean something along the lines of the most pure. I've always had some ideas and some assumptions that this holiday is likely a quiet affair. It lifts up the image of Mary as a sweet, obedient, meek, and impossibly, unobtainably pure woman. This year, I finally took the time to learn what Purísima was really all about. And let me tell you, I could not have been more wrong. Far from a quiet, meek affair about a gentle maiden, Purísima is a series of days that culminates in a festival called La Griteria. And that means the shouting. On this day, La Griteria, in which children and priests alike yell at the top of their lungs, "Quien causa tanta alegría?" or "Who is it that causes so much joy?" And the response is La Concepción de María, or Mary the Immaculate. For hours on end, families visit their neighbors in a style that almost seems sort of like trick-or-treating on Halloween, going from house to house, back and forth, saying again, what causes so much joy? Who causes so much joy? Mary the Immaculate being the response. Far, far from meekness and obedience, Purissima has become a symbol of popular resistance that is juxtaposed against the commercialization imposed on Christmas celebrations and consumer capitalism. It is a celebration that invites Nicaraguans, and indeed all of us, to practice that unreasonable joy of Mary. Whether we are in times of great prosperity and abundance, whether we are in times of drought, uncertainty, even despair, Purissima comes again and again to invite us to practice, just practice, this act of ultimate faith, the unadulterated, totally unreasonable, arms up, head back, joy of Mary. God, may it be so. Amen.